I'm super bullish on the Lightning Network, but we need to be realistic about where we are. We have a ton of work to do. Lightning Network, where it really shines, is in meat space, in the real world, face to face. Because if I'm just buying something online for like a purchase that's going to be mailed to me, like I don't need that near instant confirmation. Some people need to touch the fire. Some people need to touch the stove to realize that it's hot. But, there are other wise people that take other people's horror stories to heart. And they're like, okay, I'm not going to do custody. I'm not going to do AML KYC. I'm not going to do shitcoins. I'm not going to lie, funding an open source project is immensely difficult. We have a really clear sort of roadmap as to how we would enable Taro and Taro assets within Zeus. Fiat and Bitcoin payments are sort of at odds with each other. But on the other hand, on the other side of things, like it's a clever construction and can ultimately mean a whole lot for Bitcoin adoption.
Evan Kaloudis is the founder of Zeus, an open source and self-custodial mobile Lightning wallet. In our conversation, we discussed how Evan has built Zeus, some of the new features it offers, the tension between self-custodial and custodial Lightning wallets, and then we got into the roadmap and business model of Zeus looking forward. Evan has also been added to today's show splits. So if you enjoy this show and if you learn something new, the best way you can show your support is by sending in sats over the Lightning Network. You can use any Podcasting 2.0 app. There are dozens of them, but my favorite to use is Fountain. Before we get into today's show, just a quick message from our sponsors. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Stackwork. And Stackwork is a Lightning-powered transcription tool that takes the best of AIs and humans to create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. We'll have more from Voltage and Stackwork later in the show. Evan, thank you for taking the time to chat about all you're building today at Zeus. Why don't we start off with giving listeners a background of your time in Bitcoin? Maybe can you give people an understanding of how you first discovered Bitcoin and why you decided that this would be something you want to work on?
Sounds good, Kevin. Thanks for having me on the program. Excited to talk with you today. So getting into Bitcoin. So I was studying computer science in undergrad in New York. And I'd probably heard about it first on Hacker News or like a Slashdot. And I just always sort of, at least those first few years, I was writing it off. I'm like, digital gold. I feel like we've gone through so many iterations of this between BitGold, RuneScape Gold. It really didn't resonate with me until a later date. So probably my junior or senior year of Bitcoins when I took a dive into it, downloaded the software and started using it. And it didn't really click for me until, I went through, I had made my first transaction, sending and receiving, and then realized that I could take this wallet and, as long as I have this information, the seed, and I could go restore it anywhere else on a different computer, different device. It wasn't until then that I had that aha moment and was like, okay, yeah, this is something else. This is legit. This is the future. And it's quite funny because, I had been programming computers since I was 13 or 14. I was studying computer science. And I also very uniquely had some exposure to Austrian economics through, my family friend, my uncle. It's funny how you can have all of this specialty knowledge in all of these areas that Bitcoin touches, but it still can take years and years for it to click. And I think for most people, they need to have that hands-on experience, that aha moment of the sending, the receiving, and probably most importantly, that recovery, taking that wallet and restoring it somewhere completely different.
Right. Now, when you first had this aha moment, were you thinking of Bitcoin as a tool to store value or to send payments?
Um, I think it was a bit of both. I think you have like that aha moment when you go through the process of the transfer and you get that first confirmation in your GUI. But beyond that, I think the coming to terms with it being the store of value takes a little more time. Like there's so much that's obfuscated away with how money works today, right? Like, have you ever tried to talk to a group of friends that are not into Bitcoin or CS or any of this stuff? It's crazy the like misconceptions they have about the dollar. They're like, all right, it's backed by gold. It's all in Fort Knox, right? And you're like, no, that's not the case, and hasn't been the case in a long time. And it's really just this like needless complexity that pushes people from understanding like the real underworkings or what the real power dynamics at play are. And it's funny when you see those dynamics play out in, say, like alternate cryptocurrencies where people try to add complexity to schemes to just either try to sound smart, sound complicated, but mostly just to put normal people off from knowing the real dynamics that are important.
Mm-hmm. So now you had this aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when did you then decide? Okay, when did you go from like Bitcoin's a cool idea to I want to build Zeus?
Oh man, that wasn't for years later. So, um, I went through the rest of my college career and went down all sorts of rabbit holes, especially with shitcoins. So I was trading. I set up a GPU mining rig that I set up in my dorm room. That was really fun. Good thing I had a girlfriend at the time because that thing was like loud as a jet engine. At least while I was like mining like the noisy algorithms. I eventually switched over to some stuff that was quieter. I'm like, make a little less money, but at least I could sleep here. So that was fun. Uh, got involved a little bit with the Dogecoin community and helped code up just tiny bit of this multi-Doge wallet that was like an Electrum X fork. That was fun. And yeah, I guess in like the years that followed, the next year or two, like I started realizing, okay, like most of the stuff that I'm trading on here, I'm just trading for speculation, make a quick buck. I know it's a pump and dump. But then there were other projects, right? That I'm like, okay, like this thing has some like utility. Like I was someone who was super interested, by privacy, especially after the Snowden revelations. I'm like, okay, internet privacy is very important. Something like a Zcash or a Monero, etc. I could see great utility in having that full opaqueness of the blockchain and not have to worry about chain analysis. Then eventually I realized that was mostly crap. Zcash to a greater extent than Monero, but yeah, pretty much transitioned to Bitcoin only at that point. And yeah, after school, right, I went into cybersecurity. I wore a lot of different hats at this cybersecurity startup. Crazy and amazing experience. I worked on front end for an interface that lets you triage threats, see alerts on your network. I did about a year of working on the cloud backend interface for our threat intelligence sharing between our different customers. And I also did a year of being an analyst. So I was like, okay, help build the product. Now I get to use it out in the field. And I was helping banks and different institutions triage their alerts on their system and either find out that, it's a false positive or go find something nasty that, needs some action need to be taken on. So that was fun. So somewhere in the middle there, probably my fourth year there, I was like, okay, Bitcoin is awesome. I'd gone through the fork wars and seen like the arguments on both sides and had known about Lightning, but hadn't gotten my hands dirty. And I'm like, okay, I ran a Bitcoin node before. I signaled for, SegWit 2x. Uh, Let me take it up another level. Let me use this and see what this Lightning thing is all about. So I ultimately got a Raspberry Pi. I think I had one from like university too. Like they'd given me like the first gen one. Total piece of crap. I had to get like a newer board. I got it set up. I set it up with the Raspberry Pi Bolt, raspibolt.org. Staticus set that up, I believe. So that's like a very hands-on guide, like assuming you know a little bit about Linux, but here's all the commands you got to set up and how to set up the services. So I set that one up first and started toying around with Lightning and made a lot of mistakes there, right? Like I had a spinning disk hard drive instead of a solid state, which is like pretty much the biggest mistake you can make trying to run a Lightning node. Just your blockchain gets out of sync. It's hard to recover if they crash off, and just a big mistake there. But yeah, I eventually went through the ringer a few times, like redid the node a few times, updated the hardware. I did Raspberry Blitz, which is like a more of a self-contained thing, just like burn-in ISO. And I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm making transactions. I'm getting stickers from Blockstream. I'm like doing this stuff, but there's like all these other components to the LN node. It's like number one, it's like if you're an operator and you're managing these channels, you might want to take a look at what the state of those channels are. You might want to change the fees on them. You might want to open up new channels. And I wanted to be able to do that on the go and like say, okay, I'm going on the bus into work every day for my cyber job. I want to be able to take a look at how all that stuff is looking and modify them as I go. And the other part of it is like Lightning Network, where it really shines is in meet space, in the real world, face to face. Because if I'm just buying something online for like a purchase that's going to be mailed to me, like I don't need that near instant confirmation. Like I could just broadcast on chain, it'll settle, I'll get my goods. Like that's not the main place it's going to shine. So I'm like, okay, let me get a kickstart on this. Let's start building this mobile app. I had this previous, experience building out this interface at my cybersecurity job. We had built it with React. I had heard about React Native and thought it was a pretty good foray into mobile app development. And then just was off to the races there. Loaded up my computer with a bunch of podcasts from, a lot of shows I was listening to at the time, from TFTC, Rabbit Hole Recap, Stefan Livera, and Noted. And just started slowly building this thing out for myself. I guess I forgot an important part of the story, though. Prior to starting Zeus, I was actually putting in a couple contributions to the Zap project. So Zap is the first project that got started up by the guys who made Strike. So Jack Mahlers was working on this, and at first it was just a desktop application, which seems like it's still running pretty good. But it's got like a neutrino node in there, and you sync it up, and you can start making your first Lightning transactions. But just about at the time as I was starting to contribute, they had just kicked off their mobile applications. Like iOS was out the door, right? And I actually pitched it to Jack. I'm like, hey, Jack, I want to build a Android version of Zap using React Native. And he's like, oh, man, that would be really cool. However, someone's already started it, and we'd just prefer to do it like all native code, just in Java. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. So from there, knowing that I couldn't do Android version of Zap, I'm like, I'm going to just do my own app. I'm going to make it for iOS too, and just go off to the races. I knew I'd have a couple of advantages doing React Native, knowing that I could write the code once pretty much in most instances and create two versions of the app. And I just iterated on this thing for myself and until I was at the point where I'm like, okay, number one, it would be nice if I got help. And number two, it's good enough that I could get other eyes on it. I'm not embarrassed to show that, this is what I had put together. And I know it needs help, it needs work, but it's good enough to start for other people to start mucking around with. And
Right.
yeah, that's sort of the story of how Zeus got started up, my first free and open source project, and it's running to this day. We've got, I don't know, probably close to 10,000 users and 500 plus stars on GitHub, 30 plus contributors. It's been quite a
Very
journey.
cool. And so you highlighted at the beginning that one thing you wanted to be able to do was take your node on the go and be able to like play around with it on mobile. And I imagine you couldn't have done that before Zeus. What were some of the other things that you saw as missing in the Lightning ecosystem that compelled you to build Zeus?
Um, yeah, I mean, there just wasn't anything quite like it. And the things that were like it were just all very rudimentary. So what I had seen as, competitors to Zeus or something similar with similar functionality, like those projects either, didn't have enough steam to begin with, or the creators were, not as interested in maintaining them. Um, yeah, I thought mobile was just particularly lacking. I saw some efforts like for some of the web interfaces we had, like Ride the Lightning was really quite good and was coming up just a little bit before Zeus, I believe. Then we had Thunder Hub later on, and I thought, it was a great experience. Was doing transactions a lot with that when I wasn't using CLI. But on mobile, I just, you know, I was waiting on Zap Android, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do it my own way and use this as a learning experience to learn this new framework, even if this doesn't become a full fledged project that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm. And now that you look at it, you look a few years, into the future, and now where we are today, you look at the Lightning landscape. What do you think is missing today when you look at all the things we could add into the future and all the things that we need to get to the next level of adoption? What are some of those constraints or unmet needs today?
Oh man, so Kev, I'm super bullish on the Lightning Network, but we need to be realistic about where we are. We have a ton of work to do. Not very many people are using Lightning right now, and that's okay. But we need to keep our heads down, keep working, and ship a lot of stuff. So I think more than anything, there's a lot of stuff to be done on terms of like user experience and friendliness, especially for non-custodial users. Like Lightning works really good right now. If you're trusting some mega node to hold your keys and you don't care about getting rugged, like fire up Blue Wallet or Wallet of Satoshi or a KYC service, and like 9,999 times out of 10,000, that payment's going to go through really quickly and really well. But as far as doing it in a non-custodial way where you hold your own keys, there's a lot of work we have to do there. Um, I think especially in terms of channels and liquidity and finding ways to take that weight off users or at least help them have it auto managed to a certain extent before users are willing to say, hey, I got it from here, let me get the sticks and I'll take control. So yeah, I mean, we've been lucky to have a couple of great products in terms of wallets that do a lot of that for users already in wallets such as Breeze and Phoenix. But there's a lot of trade-offs with them. Sometimes the fees aren't abundantly made transparent to the users. There's a lot of frustrations with people's experiences there, and I think there's room for a lot of improvement.
Mm-hmm. Now, Zeus brands itself as an advanced app. And I'm curious to know what the reasoning there is. Why, when you've gone this non-custodial route, what was the strategy? Why did you pick a advanced version rather than one that was kind of like designed for newcomers or people having their very first Lightning experiences?
That's a great question. So I think it's twofold. I think it's important to note that above everything, I made Zeus to scratch my own itch, right? It's like any features that I really work hard to put into Zeus, I'm doing it because I want to use it, right? And if other people get value out of it and I could share it with them and they could improve their lives somewhat by using it, that's all just icing on the cake for me. So, me as a more advanced user, I wanted something that I could use that gives me the control, something that, maybe the nerdiness level is on like a 10 out of 10. But I also like the empowerment that gives people to have such granular controls, pretty much the whole kitchen sink in the pocket, in their pocket, and they're on their phone, and being able to do all of these like crazy nuanced things without having to do the CLI commands. So
Mm-hmm.
that's part of it. But that all being said, we do have aspirations to go to the other side of the spectrum and to just cater to, the average user. Zeus admittedly isn't my Yaya's first Lightning wallet, but I'd like to make her first Lightning wallet. I just think that by going and making the super cypherpunk version of a Lightning wallet, it'll be easier to take those lessons, reconcile them, and come out with something that's more user friendly than doing it the other way around. I really don't see someone like Breeze or Phoenix going ahead and
Mm-hmm.
making like a full fledged wallet on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah. What would a beginner friendly non custodial wallet look like to you? Like, would you be able to manage your channel balances and things like that, or what kind of complexity that exists in Zeus's advanced product would not exist on the beginner friendly version?
Well, I really like the idea of having a user sort of level up, right? So ultimately, while you want to keep things very abstract and simple for someone just getting into it, I really like the idea of like saying, okay, like now the user gets it. Now they're ready to take the whole step. Let's take the training wheels off in the same app. So maybe you start off and you're like, okay, here are your channels, or here's different uh, like trenches of liquidity, like depending on what your needs are, and perhaps like you have an LSP that's paid instead of just banking on fees or mining users' data or something, and so you just make it very straightforward there. And yeah, I think it's really just about trying to figure out how you decrease that time from installing the wallet to the time it takes to receive your first payment. And that's going to take like plugging in with an LSP. That's going to require zero confirmation channels. I think that there's tons of room for improvement. You can do a lot of small stuff to make that experience better by applying training wheels in different areas. But I think ultimately we got to keep our eyes on the prize and realize what applications we're up against. We're not up against, Zeus isn't up against Phoenix or Breeze or Wallet of Satoshi or any of those. What we want to build it, we want it to be going up against PayPal and Zelle, Cash App, Venmo. Those are the user experiences that we have to keep in mind if we want to make non-custodial Bitcoin usage or just Bitcoin usage in itself like something that the masses are going to use. Like
Mm-hmm.
we need to keep things in perspective.
I agree. Now, the four kind of payment giants you just highlighted there all share one similarity, and they are all custodial.
Yeah.
Um, so I now want to break into this thorny issue of custodial versus non-custodial on Lightning, and I want to get your view to start on why you chose non-custodial over a custodial approach.
So I think self custody and ultimately personal responsibility is a central tenet to the Bitcoin ethos. And I think that if we make decisions in building up our ecosystem that strictly favor custody and putting on those training wheels for users at the expense of them not holding their own keys, right? We're going to just end up in a new version of the current financial system with just like bells and whistles put on it. If people can ultimately do stuff like fractional reserve banking, how much better is the Bitcoin standard ultimately? And I got to say that I I'm also realistic. I know that the vast majority that people are going to be using Bitcoin, at least in the immediate future, is going to be heavily with a custody route. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't make these non-custodial experiences that are top of class. There's ways that we can make them and really highlight where we shine and where we thrive and the control we give to users and how we can empower them. But at the same time, it's going to take a lot of people to get burnt to come to the same realization of what the importance of this is. Like this cycle, the big story is, FTX and their fraud. But the next cycle, it could be like an instance of custodial Lightning users getting rugged and losing access to their funds, whether it be, from legal pressures or from, just fraud and theft from operators. And ultimately, we can eradicate that threat entirely, at least not realistically in my eyes. But we can at least give people the alternative and show them and educate them and try to push things in the direction that we want to see things.
Is there a way to get people to make that realization on their own without having a massive fraud or something blowing up in their face? Like, is there a way to get people to respect and appreciate this non-custodial idea without first losing their money?
It's tricky because everyone's different, right? So some people need to touch the fire. Some people need to touch the stove to realize that it's hot. But, there are other wise people that take other people's horror stories to heart. And they're like, okay, I'm not going to do custody. I'm not going to do AML KYC. I'm not going to do shitcoins, XYZ. Like those people are out there. They do take like these stories to heart. There's just not as many of them. And
reminds me of a quote. I think it was from Warren Buffett. He's like, you have to learn from experience, but it doesn't always have to be your own experience. You can learn from everyone else's mistakes as well.
Yeah. So, I think it's amazing when Bitcoiners can go ahead and put their ego to the side and admit their mistakes in the past. Like I've made a ton in my Bitcoin career and trading shit coins, getting rugged on some. You just got to ultimately get over that and try to be comfortable with sharing your own experiences for the better of other people.
Mm-hmm. Now, this weekend, actually, I guess it was last week, there was the African Bitcoin Conference, and there was a bunch of news that came out about Strike and Bitnob, and they're partnering up to enable transfers from US dollars into Africa and vice versa. And there was a lot of commentary about this idea and this debate of like custodial, non-custodial, of course, Strike and Bitnob being both custodial platforms. I think there was someone maybe from the Block team. I can't remember who it was, but someone said something about like, this is a partnership being built out of need rather than desire. One that like, it's just going to be something that, that the idea was that this is something that is going to be improving people's lives immediately, and they kind of need it, and they're not as concerned maybe about whether or not it's custodial. That it's just a faster and improved version of what they have today. That's me kind of paraphrasing the quote. I don't even remember where it was from. And then there was another comment. I think it was from Alex Leishman at River, and he said that mobile non-custodial Lightning is an extremely difficult technical and financial engineering challenge at scale. He's kind of left it at that. but there was a lot of discussion about this idea of like, should it be custodial, should it be non-custodial? And so I want to get your take on like, what are some of those big challenges that you face on the non-custodial side that a custodial provider might not face?
Sure. So I guess number one is like channel management and liquidity. There's a lot of people that they come and they download Zeus. They're well acquainted with how on-chain Bitcoin works. They deposit from a different wallet into Zeus onto the on-chain account. So they have an on-chain balance. But then they're like, yo, Evan, what the hell's going on here? I can't make any Lightning payments. I'm generating invoices. No one can pay to me. So like the whole concept of payment channels is foreign to them. So there's like this big educational process, right? And then it's about the direction of that liquidity, right? It's like, oh, I opened a channel to you, Evan. It's like, but no one can send me payments. It's like, oh, it's got to be balanced. I'm limited by how much is on the other side of the channel. So like that in itself is like a big like learning curve, a challenge, even for people who are well acquainted with Bitcoin. So you got that. But if you want to like rewind, like even before getting into Lightning, like that product in Africa that the Strike team has put together with BitNob, right? Like the recipients on the other side of that, they don't know that Bitcoin has been used at all or was even involved. And I think that's like a lot what a few people's like problem with it was like that. It's like, oh, they don't even know they're using Lightning. Is this even a Lightning product? It seems like just this banking relationship between these two entities, and to a certain extent, like that's true. So there's a lot of people that are frustrated and seeing, okay, we're going to see all these like banking alternative products instead of Lightning being adopted directly. And like, yeah, of course, like that's not the end goal. Like that's not great. You still have this third party risk where I guess BitNob or Strike can rug you. And that's not the end goal, right? Like we want to get rid of those intermediary parties. But in the short term, we're talking about a people who really get screwed over on a day-to-day basis by remittances. We're talking about a big pie that MoneyGram and Western Union are like just like being really bad actors and taking more money away from your family that you're trying to send money to, like at a greater basis if it's going to a poorer nation. Like there's a lot of really bad actors in that space. So, like you're gonna like get your panties in a knot over like this service getting started up. Like, I mean, it's just like so silly to get upset about. But it's also important for us to have our eyes on the prize and know where we want to get to, and know that this is like a cool step, but this is ultimately really far away from where we want our goal to be. So
Right.
it's like
Now,
it's like a trade off. Like a lot of people can benefit from it today, but like how do you try to introduce them to Lightning or Bitcoin even when it's all abstracted away? And I don't really have a good answer for you, at least for that product.
now, one thing I've heard from some people, I think maybe this was popularized by Alex Gladstein. I think he mentioned the idea that stable coins could be a stepping stone for people to get towards Bitcoin. And I wonder if the same could be said for wallets, where do you believe that custodial wallets are a stepping stone towards non-custodial wallets? Or where, if you have any idea of like where you're getting users from, are these people who are previously using non-custodial Bitcoin solutions that were not Zeus, or are they, people graduating from Wallet of Satoshi to Zeus?
I think it's a mix of a few things. So there's definitely users that are graduating onto Zeus after going up a few wallets. So it's less so going from Blue Wallet to say, or Wallet of Satoshi to Zeus directly. But I see it in a couple of different groups. So like you have Wallet of Satoshi and Blue Wallet; those are your custodial options. Then in the middle, you sort of have something like a Moon, which is self-custodial, right? But you're not really using Lightning. You're using their Lightning nodes for submarine swapping. After that, it's Breeze and Phoenix, in which you're running your own Lightning node on the device, and then Zeus. So it's more likely that someone tries out Moon or either Breeze or Phoenix before they come to Zeus instead of going directly from Wallet to Satoshi. But I think there's like a pretty clear progression there.
Mm.
But then I feel like there's a lot of users that sort of have that cheat code, and while they're not perfect, these platforms, we see a lot of users coming from, say, our Raspberry Pi Blitz, our Umbrellas, our Start Nines, these pre-built node platforms, and they're like, "Hey, this is awesome! I got a Lightning node. How do I tap into it? How do I use this thing on the go?" And Zeus is just like naturally the number one answer for those people. And they're like, okay, this is cool. This is empowering. This is an awesome wallet. And it gives me access to do pretty much anything I need to do on this device.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage empowers engineers to integrate Bitcoin and Lightning Network payments into their business stack with an enterprise-grade experience. The team at Voltage is building the complete toolset so that you can do more than simply spin up nodes, but also understand and interpret your node's data. Their new product, Surge, gives engineers the capability to quickly solve problems and optimize operations. With node insights and visibility through time series data, you get dynamic and complex insights never available before. You can get complete control with insanely fast onboarding, advanced client-side encryption, and zero management infrastructure, making backups, networking, and upgrades simple. Get a free 7-day trial today at voltage.cloud. One thing you mentioned earlier in the conversation was privacy and how you had taken a look at things like Zcash and Monero. I wonder, does non-custodial Lightning use accomplish a lot of the privacy preserving aspects that you liked when you looked at Zcash and Monero?
Oh, I mean, certainly. At least today, from a sender's perspective, at the bare minimum, you have great privacy assurances using Lightning. Now, there's some complexities when you're dealing with the channels you open up and how those are broadcast. But, new ways to sort of circumvent those being tracked are coming up every day, including alias skids or short channel IDs that are typically broadcast to identify your channel. We're adding support for those, at least with LND nodes in version 0.7. So pumped about that. But on the receiving side, generally, there's quite a bit more to do for Lightning. The issue is typically when you generate an invoice, um, it's got like your public key in it. It's like a payer needs to know how to get there. Like perhaps you have like route hints or whatever, but you're providing like a final destination as to where it goes. So you could sort of like say, okay, like this is the node that I'm paying to. So we need something called blinded routes, in which you can construct like a sort of blinded onion with the last part of those route hints as to get to your node are sort of concealed from the payer. So there's definitely a lot of stuff that needs to be done to get us that, like nothing's perfect, right? But I think with a couple of enhancements here and there, Lightning can be a highly private payment system.
And do you expect
And
that that's going to be a separation point between custodial and non-custodial over time, that these will diverge and become like custodial wallets may require you to provide more and more information, and non-custodial wallets may get more and more private over time? You think those two diverge?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think regulations are going to have a lot of these services, these custodial services, to AML, KYC their customers, get information about them, but also just because of regulations, just track even more data. Like if you make a payment on Wallet of Satoshi or Blue Wallet, so at least with the standard setup they have, they could track pretty much everything. I don't think Moon is that much better. And even nodes, I mean wallets like Breeze or Phoenix, in which most users aren't opening up their own channels, or they can't in the case of Phoenix, like that LSP, that single node you're operating through, um, can ascertain a lot about you if you're super dependent on them. So that's why, like, if I want to build out some LSP services with Zeus, I want to make sure that we carry over that open your own channel functionality and encourage it for users, so that the LSP is not just some singular source of information that you could ascertain about users. But yeah, definitely that divide is going to just continue to grow over the years.
Now, why haven't we seen much? It seems to me, at least, that we haven't seen much regulatory activity, people clamping down on Lightning providers or Lightning apps. Is it just too small today, or why have we not seen any significant, at least compared to the regulatory crackdowns going on in crypto? It seems like Lightning has kind of dodged most of the regulatory scrutiny to date.
I think you're pretty much on the money. Like, Lightning is just too small right now. Um, it's like silly analogy, but like if you're a crook, right? If you're a mobster, right? In a lot of cases, you're just hoping that they pinch all the bigger guys before they get to you, right? But I don't know. At the same time, um, Lightning itself probably can't be regulated too heavily. Some of the services that are operating custodial probably will see more scrutiny. I think in a lot of cases, they're just operating servers out of jurisdictions far outside of the United States' reach. So that helps. But I truly believe that once we see stuff like stablecoins on Lightning in the form of Taro, the providers there and people operating on the edges are going to definitely be regulated. I don't think that's going to mean regulation for the whole of the Lightning network. I just think that if you're going to be providing these like currency switching services and helping people get routes to different services that are denominating their Lightning payments in fiat, those parties are going to be regulated for sure.
Will there be any? Will Taro have any impact on Zeus? Is that part of the product roadmap? What do you expect people to be able to do with it using their mobile phone?
So it's really interesting because with the addition of Lightning Node Connect, our new protocol for connecting to your LND node remotely, we have a really clear sort of roadmap as to how we would enable Taro and Taro assets within Zeus. It's something that there's definitely a lot of demand for. I think it's more so me exploring with it, getting more comfortable with it before we put it in and make that commitment to it. Um, it's really tricky thing to reconcile because fiat and Bitcoin payments are sort of at odds with each other. But on the other hand, on the other side of things, like, it's really a clever construction and can ultimately mean a whole lot for Bitcoin adoption. And I think we just need to figure out how we can minimize the downsides of it and, just provide the best experiences for users and a clear path for them to accept Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. And do you expect fiat payments to be the biggest use case for Taro, or there's ideas that there could be other shit coins listed, there could be intra company kind of private tokens. It allows for all sorts of assets. So, but I imagine if we take a look at the rest of the crypto landscape and see all the other assets that are available today, stablecoins are a big driver already. Do you expect that to be true as well on Taro, or are there any other types of assets that you think might see a lot of adoption on Bitcoin, even if they haven't in the crypto landscape?
So number one, yes, definitely see stablecoins as being the number one driver. It's pretty much the main purpose of this whole thing. Shitcoins, they will exist because anyone could issue these assets on Bitcoin using Taproot. Whether they'll be popular, I think they're going to be way less popular than shitcoins and other mediums on ERC20 blockchains and whatnot, because just of the ethos of Bitcoin, right? Like people that have been using Lightning and Bitcoin already are most likely going to tell you, okay, like you don't want a shitcoin, and what a lot of the stuff you can expect to be issued on there is most likely going to be just garbage that just got issued. I mean, and since there's like no real like issuance mechanism, there's like no proof of work for these assets. Like the mechanics are certainly less dynamic for you to do a shitcoin on Taro. Other assets you said like company shares or stuff like that, that'll definitely become more popular. That could be a pretty cool way for a company to potentially like raise by selling equity in the company. So that could potentially be very interesting. But I think it remains to be seen. Probably depends on what jurisdictions those companies are operating out of and what their risk tolerance looks like. And then lastly, I will say stuff like NFTs will likely not be popular on Taro, at least not on the Taro Lightning enabled side, as these channels have to be specific to a single asset. And if you're minting a one of one NFT, putting it in a Taro Lightning channel is not going to make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, that makes sense. Now I want to get into Zeus and the latest release. You guys are working on a 0.7 release. Can you highlight for listeners some of the features? I think you already talked about a couple of them, but what are the new features that you guys are excited about introducing in this release?
Cool, let's do it. So I'd say the biggest things, let's try to narrow it to three. There's so much goodness in this release. Three features. Number one is Lightning Node Connect. Number two is our new home screen. So brand new view when you pop open that. And number three is BIP21 unified QR codes. So let's just rattle off each one. So Lightning Node Connect. This is a killer, I would say, for people that have been struggling to connect their node to Zeus over the last year because of issues with Tor. So Tor has gotten super popular for users connecting to their devices at home. I'd say largely because of stuff like Zeus, different wallets like Wasabi, Samurai, and the like at-home nodes like the Umbrellas and the Raspberry Blitzes. Like people are just spinning up these nodes, and pretty much every service on there has like a Tor hidden service. And since the use of these hidden services is increasing, and the number of relays on Tor is sort of staying stagnant, that means there's much more demand than supply for accessing these services. And in a lot of cases, you're not going to be able to get to Tor. You're going to get a bad circuit. It's going to either be really slow or you're not going to be able to make a connection at all. So what we've done is implement this new protocol called Lightning Node Connect that the fine folks at Lightning Labs have set up. And you're able to essentially punch through your firewall, your NAT at home. You know, it could be locked in your closet, not exposed to the internet other than connected to your modem, right? And you can create a session that can be accessed from anywhere in the world as if the node is just on ClearNet in like a data center or on like a virtual private server. And it just makes for a fantastic experience, a 10x better experience than using Tor. So there's the caveat that you need to install Lightning Terminal on top of your instance of LND. So it doesn't work for like C Lightning or Eclair users, at least not currently. Those users might want to use like some sort of home VPN service that they set up themselves, or maybe a commercial product like Zero Tier or Tailscale. If you want more info on those, come join us in the Zeus chat on Telegram. We got a bunch of people that'll get you set up. So Lightning Node Connect is LND only, but we're super excited because the APIs that it exposes on top of Lightning Terminal mean that not only do you have access to everything in LND, but you'll have access to the loop, pool, Faraday, which is the counting system, and eventually Taro calls. So it's quite possible in a future release, not only can Zeus could potentially do stable coins on Taro, but you can get liquidity from something like Lightning Pool, which is a marketplace for selling channels. And you could also rebalance your channels using Lightning Loop. So there's a lot of potential for a lot of really cool functionality that's going to make things on Lightning a whole lot easier for users.
Mm-hmm. And then you had two other features you wanted to highlight: the new update to the home screen, and then one that I'm really excited about is Bit21 and unified QR codes.
Absolutely. So what we did for new home screen, I'm not sure you could see it, is
Oh
basically
yeah.
we got rid of the default view where you'll see the balances on Lightning, on chain, different accounts. That's now on the secondary tab, so you could get to that still. But the point of this keypad is to be able to enter in an amount really quickly and either quickly receive to like an invoice that you generate or send out the door to like a Lightning address as quickly as possible. So it's two tiered. It's number one, you get more privacy by not flashing your balances when you open up the app, but also your sending and receiving flows are just 2 or 3 clicks fewer. So really pumped about that. And there's a good transition point into those BIP21 unified invoices because with this home screen, you could say, hey, I want to receive 5,000 sats. You hit request, and boom, you get a unified QR code. So the issue that unified QR codes are trying to address is the difference between on-chain transactions and Lightning transactions. So on-chain, you get a Bitcoin address. That is just this string that could be you could push any amount of sats to it. And then on Lightning is an invoice that's one time, as opposed to on-chain address that it could receive as many transactions as possible. And it's got a hard amount embedded in it. So instead of assuming that you need to present both of these options to a user, depending on what kind of wallet they have, whether they have Lightning enabled on their wallet yet or not. Interestingly enough, we're also seeing wallets and different setups that only do Lightning, for at least for some custodial setups. But anyway, the idea is you just present the user with this one QR code, and the wallets are smart and they know which ones they could pay. So yeah, instead of having tabs to fiddle with or have the user get confused about on-chain or Lightning, depending on where they are in their Bitcoin journey, they should just be able to scan one QR code and their wallet does the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So like, on-chain wallets say, okay, I'm just going to pull out the on-chain, Lightning only. They'll say, yeah, I'm going to get the invoice out of there and pay that. Something like Zeus is a little more smart and says, hey, we found a unified QR code. What account do you want to pay it on? Your Lightning account, your on-chain account? Maybe you want to, in the future, pay it from a hardware wallet. That's hopefully for version 0.8. But then we'll also show the ability for someone to query mempool.space for their rates. So before even making this payment, you can say, hey, let's see what the mempool looks like. What's it going to cost for me to get it there in, I don't know, depending on the situation. I'm at the supermarket. What's the 10-minute rate? Is it for an online payment? It doesn't matter as much. So you could pull it there. Then when you're in Lightning, depending on the implementation, you could potentially pull the rates there too and make an informed decision on which way to pay based on your fee environment.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool. And this is something I think there's at least a handful of companies that have adopted this. I know Cash App introduced it at Bitcoin 2022. I believe BitNob has integrated unified QR codes as well. Why do you think other Lightning companies, there's maybe, I don't know, 3 to 4, maybe 5 that I've seen with unified QR codes, but there's a lot that don't have it still. Why do you think that is?
So for the companies that are adopting it, right? So like I think we saw Miles Sutter from Cash App put a full thread about who's picking it up. I think number one thing there is probably tons of like help and support hours just trying to explain this difference to users. And I think this is like quite a nice solution of trying to nip that in the bud. Obviously, it's going to take most wallets coming on board and doing it, but I think they ultimately will. Um, it's not a huge lift. It's going to take some engineering hours to like iron out all the kinks and make sure everything's handled properly, both from the sending and receiving side. But it's going to happen, and I think the only reason that a lot of wallets haven't set it up yet is they're trying to like sort of suss it out, see what issues other people have. There's been a lot of concerns about, oh, the QR codes are going to get too big. There's too much data in there. And also, B is like the engineering hours and having different priorities. A lot of Bitcoin startups and wallets are already spread pretty thin. And others just don't have Lightning integrated at all. So we won't see anything from them at all. But
it strikes me as like an interesting feature for a lot of Lightning applications to integrate, especially the ones that require you to or want you to have a wallet balance. Because a lot of times, like things like Fountain, things like Stacker News, things like Mash, like these are all, they're somewhat social. And so you can be paying or receiving sats for content you create, whatever. And it depends on a lot of people having money on the Lightning Network. And that's a big constraint because you got to teach people there's a Lightning wallet. And I guess if you can abstract that away and say, hey, you want to start sending sats on Fountain, well, just send money to this QR code in on-chain or Lightning, doesn't even matter where it's coming from, just send these sats here. Now it's in your custodial account. Now you can start playing around with it, graduate to non-custodial, leave it in custodial, whatever your choice is. It's now on Lightning, and you can move it back to on-chain when you want.
Yeah, I think this just ties in a lot to, decreasing that time to interact time, like how do you minimize that time from user getting set up with a wallet to either sending or receiving their first payment? So I think that ties into that a whole lot. And if you don't have to explain, or if you have to explain less differences between these parts of the Bitcoin stack in Lightning and on-chain, you're going to get more and more adoption by just making these hurdles much shorter.
Are there any particular features that you've integrated or strategies that you're using today to acquire new users for Zeus? Like, what do you see as like some of the low-hanging fruit to pull on for increasing adoption of Zeus?
Good question. Well, it really depends on where things are. A lot of user demand. We're just trying to be the first in class in our category, which I think we could pretty safely say that we are right now. But yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what needs arise. Like this last year, dealing with Tor has been a nightmare. So that just instantly made prioritizing Lightning Node Connect and similar alternatives like our number one priority. So it really depends on, what people's needs are. But, moving forward, I think we have like a really strong foundation. I think we're going to have to start experimenting with some more stuff, seeing what sort of stuff hasn't been done, but also going back to helping that adoption out. How do we lower that barrier to entry? So yeah, like moving forward, we're thinking a lot about our LSP and how we can monetize that, give people access to liquidity in a real, top shelf way, but also in a very ethical way in which, all the fees are spelled out in advance. We're not mining anyone's data. And yeah, just other methods of just making it easier. Like I don't want to only cater to people who have like a node at home that they could connect to. We ultimately want to have a version of Zeus in which you have the node all in one package and you just have to grab it from our website or an app store and go off to the races with a full node in your pocket.
Right. One thing you mentioned was the issues with Tor.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier on about how there's this supply and demand imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know enough about it to make a educated comment on it. But I know that in Bitcoin, we have this saying that Bitcoin fixes everything, right? Bitcoin fixes this and aligns incentives. I wonder, is there a place for Bitcoin to help out here and align the kind of like supply and demand mismatch that you're seeing on Tor, either making it a paid service over Lightning, allowing these participants who are helping support the Tor network to earn money? Is that something like it seems this has been an issue for months? I remember hearing it may have been in June there was like a DDoS attack on Tor, and it seems like it never really resolved. It's just perpetually an issue. But it's also a service that a lot of Bitcoiners love, and a lot of people look at it and say this is a great privacy preserving tool. And I think it would be, I think a lot of Bitcoiners would be very unhappy if it no longer existed. And I wonder, I'm just kind of brainstorming off the top of my head here, but like, is there a role for Bitcoin to play in supporting the Tor network?
Absolutely, Kevin. I think this is a great question. We'll have to dive into it. So, first of all, it's good that Bitcoiners already understand the importance of privacy and of the Tor network. So it's been really encouraging seeing a lot of people set up, different fundraisers, encouraging other people to set up their own Tor exit nodes and relays to help sustain the network. So that's been great on its own, right? But ultimately, you got to look at incentives. And the incentives there are really just people trying to preserve their own privacy, right? And to be altruistic. And I think there's a limit as to how far that can really go. So, like, long term, it's not a sustainable way to just do like fundraisers to run Tor nodes. So, yeah, I mean, I would absolutely love to see Tor or a similar privacy preserving network to operate on a streaming basis with sats, in which you're paying for every request you send off or get back. I think that would be amazing. Um, I think there are a lot of challenges in doing that, namely in making sure that the data you're getting back is like valid and not just some nonsense, some peer serving up trying to steal sats. So I don't know if we can find some sort of crafty way to verify those calls. Probably not because of how the web works. You might end up with some sort of incentive, like in like a reputation system, but that's also very tricky. Um, so yeah, I mean, I definitely see the potential for it, and I'd love to see it. It's just that there's a lot of challenges in doing it, and I don't think it's just going to pop up overnight. I think it's going to take concerted effort. But now that we have this micro unit in the Satoshi, or even if the mill is Satoshi, if you want to get crazy with it, we can have all sorts of new economic behavior that just wasn't like possible previously. Like it doesn't make sense to sell anything less than $1 in a lot of cases because of the credit card processing fees. A lot of establishments have their card minimums a lot higher than that because of their processing rates. And when that no longer becomes a problem, and as long as you have your inbound liquidity, the processing fees really get paid by the payer. Just LN just invites so many different new use cases that you and I probably haven't even thought of yet. So super excited by those new economic opportunities and situations to arise. And yeah, it's just going to take a lot of experimentation, but I think that's like a great example of something we might see come to fruition.
Is there any, do you have any examples off the top of your head of new economic behavior that you anticipate or hope that we'll see when Lightning payments become more mainstream?
So let's talk about something that has come to fruition, although not at a crazy huge scale. We do now have podcasting 2.0, in which producers of podcasts can now receive Satoshis on a streaming basis at a minutely rate, um, at a rate at which the users choose, right? They call it value for value. If you get value from the program, you determine how much that value is to you, and you give it to the producers voluntarily. And I think that that's amazing. It's really empowering if you're on the other side of that, seeing the stats stream in and seeing your ideas validated in real time. It's really cool how it's split up, and you can give a producer or an executive producer on the show that's been helping out a certain cut of those sats coming in, uh, receiving messages in through boostagrams or like these messages that come alongside your payments. It's super empowering, and I think it's going to create for more honest and fair media, because you're not like perverted by the incentives of maintaining advertisers or subscribers paying like a fixed fee. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of challenges with it, especially since it's a voluntary thing. But I think some of the content that we're seeing produced like this is quite beautiful, and we're going to see a lot more Bitcoin podcasters toss their ads to the wayside, and as a result, be able to produce a better product where they're a more honest version of themselves, a more true version of themselves. So that's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
So
We'll
yeah,
get to try it out on this show. Actually, I've been doing this. So after the show, I'll have to get your Node pub key. But I've been doing this with every guest since maybe episode like 40 or 41, and I've had every guest get a share of the split. And so sometimes they've chosen to donate it to the Human Rights Foundation or something, or take it themselves. And
that's really nice.
you get to see the messages come in. And yeah, it's a very cool system for. I think one place where it's really useful is in knowing when your podcast has potential to get product market fit, because you don't have that signal if you're starting out a podcast and you don't have a big presence online. It's very hard to get that signal, because you have to, until now, you've had to wait until you either get monetization on YouTube, which happens after like 4,000 hours of listening, or you get an advertiser, which requires you to be a big enough show for an advertiser to want to participate. Until that point, there's no real signal of whether or not you're doing a good job. And so that, I think, is one really useful feature of Podcasting 2.0 is you get immediate feedback, and you get it on every episode too. So if you do a bad episode, you get a couple bad comments, you go, okay, they didn't like it, on to the next one. If you do a great episode, you get 10 times more comments, and you go, wow, I had no idea this many people were listening. So yeah, you're right. It's very it's like a much
it's
more
not just the
signal.
comments, right, Kev? Like the comments you could still get from other mediums, Web 2.0, right? But the fact that people will throw like, 10,000, 100,000 sats because this episode was great, and you see that bottom line change too, like that's the real news signal that you get out of it.
Yeah. And the comments tend to be, they tend to be higher quality, and they tend to be more positive, I found. Yeah. Like it's not going to be, if someone's going to tell you this was a bad episode, you're actually going to get most of those comments on YouTube. It's not going to be the person who sent you 10,000 sats and then told you it was a bad episode, because that doesn't make any sense. So you actually you avoid a lot of the trolls and the kind of like destructive comments that you might find elsewhere.
I love that you get just that constructive criticism, the people that are willing to support and are not just there to troll. That's excellent.
Yeah, for sure.
But so while we're still on Podcast 2.0, I want to plug the second Zeus product that we've shipped. It's called Echo. So if you go to echoln.com, we've got a Podcasting 2.0 web player. And this is another application that I made starting to just scratch my own itch. Basically, it uses Lightning Node Connect, that new protocol that we've just built into Zeus. You get a pairing phrase from Lightning Terminal, pop it in, you're connected to your node. Then you could search the tens of millions of podcasts on the podcasting index. I believe, I think it's close to 100,000, or is it 10,000 shows?
It's 10,000 now.
Yeah. 10,000. Okay. You could add those. They get saved to your local storage. You could start streaming. and you just set the rate at which you want to share sats to the episode, and you're listening in. You hit the minute mark, and the you get a notification that your node is trying to make payments, and you'll see which ones go through, which ones don't, which get tried again. And you can make your comments, your boostograms to the podcast producers. It's great. It's admittedly, we just got it started last month at TabConf in Atlanta. I sort of just made it a mission to hack together something with Lightning Node Connect and the new tools I've helped build for it. But it's a great alternative if you don't want to be using like a separate wallet for doing this podcasting 2.0, and you want to have a good way of listening to your shows at home. Check out Echo. It's echoln.com.
Very cool. Excited to try it out. I want to touch on one more topic here. And we talked about the sustainability of projects, and I want to talk about the business model for Zeus and figure out, like, I know you have a contributor page, I believe, on the site, and I want to get a better idea of like how you see the funding of Zeus evolving over time. Is it primarily going to come from donations in perpetuity? Where does revenue come from over time? Would love to just dive into the sustainability of the operations of Zeus.
Yeah, sure thing. So it's a great question, Kevin. I'm not going to lie, funding an open source project is immensely difficult. Haven't made a crazy amount of money on it, but we've, very graciously accepted a couple of grants. Like we got one from the Human Rights Foundation for a Bitcoin a couple of years back, which was amazing. So grateful for their work. And then more recently, we have a contributors page where we have 3 tiers. We have Olympians, gods, and mortals, depending on how much you donate. And you get a display on our About page on the Zeus website, as well as a display on the Zeus app back in the Help and About pages. You get your Twitter account linked to, as well as your profile pic. And we actually rank people depending on how much they've donated. So if you want to make a second, third, and fourth donation, you could potentially leapfrog other people in the list and make your way up that leaderboard. So we're messing around with a couple of interesting different models like that. We want to just make it like fun for people to, contribute to a project they really like and get some recognition for doing so, and just mess around with the incentives that, all Bitcoiners will tell you are paramount. So messing around with that, and it's been great. Honestly, we've gotten a lot more in just like donations out of sheer generosity than like some Lightning based businesses have made in revenue, which is something crazy. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I would love to just make this full-time endeavor and just work on it all the time, but I still think that we're a little whiles out from that. So it's going to be a transition as we start offering up commercial services. So that's largely going to be out of Lightning Service Provider. So stuff like liquidity, if you need channels, if you need, your channel state backed up, stuff like that. I don't want to get into too much details, but largely I think the majority of any commercial services would be coming from providing liquidity or connectivity with channels in and out to you.
Right. So, okay. So maybe some future revenue from that, but until then, primarily funding through donations.
Yep. So I would say we want to get out our more user-friendly app first, but the LSP stuff might come before that. We'll see. We're at sort of an interesting point right now, but definitely working on those 2 things. And I'm just trying to make sure that, there's a lot of uncertainty, especially in the markets today. Like if you try to get some money from a Bitcoin, crypto, VC, whatever, it's a little perilous considering the market conditions. So definitely not the right time to do that. But I believe in due time, we'll get to a place where we want to be and be able to provide some incredible services up to our users.
Love it.
Yeah, it's gonna happen sooner than later. Just hang tight. Just lower your time preferences.
It's always good advice. I want to jump into a segment I do at the end of every show. It's called the lightning round. Got a few rapid fire questions for you. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Stackwork. Stackwork is a lightning powered platform for generating high quality transcripts of all your audio or video content. They combine AI engines and hundreds of human workers all over the world who are paid over the Lightning Network to assemble these transcripts. And that's what lets Stackwork create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. To see the results for yourself, you can check out my personal website where I host transcripts for all my podcast episodes. If you want to learn more about Stackwork, visit stackwork.com. That is STAK work.com. If you could change anything about the Lightning Network, what would you change?
More user privacy, number one. There's still a lot that could be ascertained being in the middle, listening to payments. So let's, number one, let's get more people using skid aliases. Number two, blinded routes. Number three, L2 and channel factories will make things a lot better. So yeah, more privacy, number one.
You mentioned at the beginning of the show that Zeus has about 10,000 users. A year from now, how many users will Zeus have?
Hopefully at least 50% more. We just want to keep growing at a good clip. And I think that is sustainable. I think a lot of people who may have been put off by Tor issues are going to really like the LNC experience. So if you can put a Lightning terminal on top of your LND, it rocks.
Very cool. How many human beings do you think have made a Lightning payment in the last 30 days?
Oh boy, that's such a good question. I don't know. Last 30 days, hundreds of thousands for sure. Hopefully millions, but not too sure about that.
Yeah, right on the cusp there. Fair enough.
Yeah, it's got to be right on the cusp. It's sort of hard to measure, though. On Bitcoin, you could count the transactions on chain, but LN is a little more opaque there. So
yeah, that's fair. Has there been any book that has meaningfully changed your view on the world?
Countless. Let me think of a good one that I've read recently. Fourth Turning has been really good. Really like that, and thinking back to the other historical examples of big like precipices of major change in civilization, and I truly do believe Bitcoin is one of them. Been talking to a lot of people about the ethics of money production, especially now that crypto fraud is sort of being washed aside. People really need to do some self-reflection and just consider how money is issued and what that all looks like. And I think that book really does a fantastic job of doing that. Plus, it's free on Mises.org, so no excuse not to read that book.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely recommend those two.
If you could only hold one asset for the next decade and it could not be Bitcoin, what asset would it be?
Probably land, but there's a lot of uncertainty still. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of companies and stock that you can get by very well holding, but I don't know. The next 10 years, things are changing quite quickly. Maybe that company's not even around right now. So
yeah,
hard to say. Probably land, but comes with its own set of challenges.
Fair enough. Who is one builder in the Bitcoin or Lightning ecosystem that you want to give a shout out to for the great work they're doing?
Sure. I think someone who doesn't get a lot of attention or shine really is Ali Gugera from Lightning Labs. I think he has made incredible contributions on LND and other places in the ecosystem. Yeah, I don't think he gets enough credit. He's amazing.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much for the time. Before you go, where can listeners go to learn more about you and Zeus?
Okay, so anyone who's on Twitter, we are at Evan Kaloudis. That's Kaloudis. My full name spelled out. Zeus is at ZeusLN. You can find us on Telegram. ZeusLN is our group there. We got a lot of people there. But really, everything is on GitHub, free and open source. AGPL, V3 license. You can fork Zeus, do whatever you want with it pretty much. That's at github.com/ZeusLN/Zeus. If you want to just get an overview of the project, we also got a website at ZeusLN.app. We just dropped version 0.7.0 beta 1 with all those cool features we talked about today. And in about a week, fingers crossed, we should be on all the general app stores. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Very cool. Thanks again for the time. Hope we can do it again soon.
Great. Thanks for having me, Kev.
All right. In the last 7 days, you guys sent in 32,184 sats. That came in from 27 different supporters. Thank you to all 27 of you for contributing to the show. It means a lot to me. Let's run through the top 5 of the week. We have Castillo_BTC sent in 9,800 sats. We have an anonymous user from Breeze who sent in 6,686 sats. Hansi Warlord sent in 4,273 sats. Odium sent in 3,499 sats. And Blockchain Boog sent in 2,760 sats. We also had 4 comments from the last episode. We have Vake, who says, "It's my 3rd favorite Bitcoin Ben," in response to episode 89 with Ben Carmen. There are a lot of Bens in the Bitcoin industry. Glad to see that Ben Carmen made the top 3, though. It was a great episode. Castillo_BTC said, "Great show and glad we got Ben on Team Bitcoin." Sent in 9,800 sats too. That's a huge boost. Thank you, Castillo_BTC. Blockchain Boog says, "Great interview," in response to episode 87 with Caitlin Long. Sent in 2,450 sats for that one. Thank you, Blockchain Boog. And Odium says, "As always, excellent questions and high quality content from KR." That's my handle on Fountain. Happy New Year. Thank you, Odium. Thank you for the 2,450 sats as well. And I hope you all had a happy New Year. And I can't wait to see what you guys send in this week.